Today, the House Oversight Committee released this preliminary report that is titled, "Whistleblowers Raise Grave Concerns with Trump Administration's Effort to Transfer Sensitive Nuclear Technology to Saudi Arabia." Now, if you know nothing else about Saudi Arabia at all, the one thing you probably know is that Saudi floats on a sea of oil. Given that, you might wonder why that country of all countries might want to put nuclear power plants in Saudi Arabia. Right? I mean, Saudi Arabia has a lot of problems. Access to energy is not one of those problems. But getting nuclear power plants maybe isn't their end game here. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has started to say out loud and bluntly in recent years that his country may soon develop nuclear weapons. Well, scientifically, nuclear power plant technology and nuclear weapons technology are kissing cousins. So there are laws in the United States and around the world about restricting the transfer of nuclear technology abroad. Those laws apply to nuclear power plant technology because if you get nuclear power plant technology, you're pretty far down the road toward having nuclear weapons tech. Well, now, in this report today, the Oversight Committee, together with the Intelligence Committee, they say they are investigating whistleblower reports from inside the federal government that senior Trump administration officials have been pursuing a plan to give nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia in contravention of U.S. law that prohibits that, even after they were warned it would be illegal for them to pursue this plan. According to these whistleblower reports, these Trump administration officials have been pursuing this plan along the lines of a business proposal from which some of them would personally financially benefit. Joining us now is Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi. He's a Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, thank you very much for making time for us tonight. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Rachel.
So the whistleblowers who are bringing these concerns to your committee are suggesting that this plan was advanced by Trump National Security Advisor Mike Flynn back in the hot minute when he was in the administration back in 2017. But there's also the implication that it didn't die with Flynn leaving the administration, that it's still being pursued today?
That's right. Even after Michael Flynn left, some of his deputies, along with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, basically took it upon themselves to continue with this plan to basically trade secret nuclear technology from America in return for contracts to build and operate nuclear reactors in Saudi Arabia.
In terms of the potential criminal implications here, right, there's a self-dealing concern in terms of whether or not officials who are pursuing this were themselves in a position to financially benefit from any knock-on effects of this change in American policy. But then the transfer of the technology itself is also something that's highly regulated, not just by American sort of tradition or reasonable restraint, but also by law.
Absolutely. There's something called the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, and specifically Section 123 of that act, which specifically requires congressional approval for the export of sensitive nuclear technology to other countries. And so this was clearly an end run around Congress, not to mention, as you previously said, an end run around conflicts of interest rules. Also, Michael Flynn committed a felony in omitting his contacts with Saudi Arabia prior to coming to the administration on his SF-86 form. That's the form that's required for security clearance and so forth.
In terms of that last point there, one of the things that we have since come to learn is that, as far as I understand it, there was a criminal referral from the Democrats on the Oversight Committee to Robert Mueller, to the special counsel's office, specifically on that issue of Mike Flynn and his security clearance application and whether or not he was forthcoming about his contacts with Saudi Arabia about this plan. One of the things that I found interesting about that is that I feel like we've heard a lot of stories about Trump administration officials leaving things off those security clearance applications, not mentioning things. But in the case of Mike Flynn, in this case, it sounds like, I mean, he invented the name of a hotel that he supposedly stayed at, which is a hotel that doesn't exist. He said
something like the King Khalid Hotel in Saudi Arabia or something, which doesn't exist.
Which doesn't exist. I mean, that's literally the name of the airport at Riyadh, but there's no hotel by that name.
He said he spoke, been there, but yeah.
He said he spoke at a conference which doesn't appear to have existed. He left off who paid for him to go there. I mean, this seems like This seems like not something he forgot, but something he tried to create a whole fake cover story about.
Absolutely. I mean, his errors and omissions are only rivaled by Jared Kushner's, which I've kind of been after in the last 2 years. As you might recall, Jared Kushner had 100 errors and omissions on his own security clearance form. And so these guys are, in my opinion, walking, talking conflicts of interest.
Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, member of the House Oversight Committee. And am I right that you are also now a member of the House Intelligence Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you slept at all since you found out that these are your two committees?
It's been busy, but we have something called caffeine.
Oh, very good. I'm well aware and on your side on that. Sir, thank you for your time tonight. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, lots more to get to tonight. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.